With Minecraft's modding scene so heavily invested in technological advancement, it comes as no surprise that energy generation happens to be a relatively important facet of a lot of large mods and mod packs. As you would expect, progressing through these mods typically unlocks more powerful energy generation options that usually culminate in the pinnacle of energy generation, the nuclear reactor. Be it fission or fusion, modern Minecraft has an obsession with nuclear reactions, but also what happens when they go wrong. Nuclear meltdowns are practically synonymous with tech packs, and especially their playthroughs on YouTube. I mean, we all know at least one Let's Play that ended with a draconic reactor explosion. Seeing as my other series are taking a little bit of time, I've decided to provide my incredibly unwarranted and certainly biased ranking of what I consider the best of modern Minecraft's reactor meltdowns. I've decided to approach this ranking by identifying the four major traits that make a meltdown. Their destruction, which is how many blocks are broken, their fallout, which is how much radiation is released and how that mod treats its radiation, their debris, which is remaining parts of the reactor, corium, liquids that are released from the explosion, stuff like that, and the dope factor, which is stuff like additional animations and effects. Now, because most of y'all have probably seen a draconic evolution reactor meltdown before, I'll use it as an example for how the scoring system will work. Alright, now that we've seen the meltdown, we can begin to judge it. Destruction-wise, this meltdown gets a clear 10 out of 10. I mean, this crater goes beyond the render distance and could easily swallow a base whole. Debris-wise, the draconic reactor will get a 6 out of 10, as it does in fact place lava all over the crater when it explodes. In fact, it has a pretty cool interaction with thermal expansion where, if installed, the lava will be replaced with blazing pyrotheum. Unfortunately, I can't give this meltdown any points from the fallout category, as it releases no radiation whatsoever. And now for the dope points. This meltdown gets a nice round 10 dope points to its dope factor, because everything about this meltdown, from its countdown to its animation, is really cool. This gives the draconic reactor's meltdown a grand total of 26 points. This would mean more if it was actually being placed among the other reactor meltdowns, but I guess it has a cool number now.
Okay, now that we have a baseline established for how these rankings work, it's time to start actually ranking some meltdowns. If you know anything about how reactors work, which, let's be honest, if you're watching this video you probably do, you shouldn't be surprised by a fusion reactor placing the lowest on our list. NuclearCraft's fusion reactor has a very underwhelming meltdown that nets at 1 point for destruction, as only the constituent blocks of the reactor were damaged, 3 for debris, which is a score completely carried by that lava flow, and 2 for fallout because a small amount of radiation is emitted. All dope points will be withheld because, let's be honest here, this is not a dope meltdown. This nets a total of 6 points, making it the lowest ranked meltdown on this list. Admittedly, this meltdown leaves a pretty big crater, so it gets a solid 8 out of 10 points in terms of destruction. But regrettably, this reactor doesn't really get points from anywhere else, although I'll throw in a dope point for a default Minecraft explosion animation. Like, I know a radiation status debuff exists in Industrial Craft, but the meltdown doesn't really seem to take advantage of it. This gives the Industrial Craft fission reactor 9 points. Our first reactor from HBM's nuclear tech, the research reactor, has a pretty underwhelming meltdown, but introduces some of what I consider to be the integral parts of a nuclear meltdown. Namely, this meltdown introduces corium, which in this case grants it 1 point in the debris category. It also gets 4 points in the fallout category, as coming from HBM it inherits its radiation mechanic, which is pretty robust. Factoring the small explosion and default Minecraft animation, this meltdown gets 11 points. Emitting some radiation from the items dropped during the explosion, ReactorCraft's fission reactor scores slightly higher than the research reactor. 1 point in fallout, 6 points in debris, 4 in destruction, and 1 additional dope points for having an explosion animation. Nuclear Craft's molten salt reactor is another reactor mainly carried by debris, earning 5 points for its corium leak. Together with 6 points from fallout and 1 from destruction, the molten salt reactor gets a grand total of 12 points. So you're probably wondering why the nuclear craft fusion reactor has made a surprise reappearance. Well, it turns out it can fail in two ways: overheating and magnetic containment failure. While magnet failure isn't necessarily a meltdown per se, I'm putting it on this list regardless because this type of failure is actually more common than overheating, earning 3 points for destruction, 4 for fallout, 5 for debris, namely from the plasma leak, and 1 dope point. This type of failure is not tied to the reactor's temperature, as it only occurs when the electromagnetics making up the reactor lose power when it is running. Nuclear Craft's fission reactor, the last entry from the mod, gets 6 points in fallout and debris respectively, and 2 points in destruction. It has some strong action in the corium department and releases a good bit of radiation, but isn't very destructive and has no animation, netting it 14 points. Mechanism's fission reactor's meltdown ranks surprisingly high, with a solid 7 points from its fallout. Seriously, Mechanism's radiation is way more dangerous than I thought it was, and it has a nice visual indicator as well. Its explosion isn't too bad either, garnering 5 destruction points and 1 dope point. The fire also adds 3 debris points for a total of 16. The pressurized water reactor is very similar to nuclear craft and Mechanism's fission reactors in structure, gaining 6 points in debris and 4 in destruction. With an extra 4 points for HBM's radiation and 1 dope point for the default explosion, the PWR nets a total of 16 points. HBM's Zernox reactor is a very solid meltdown, earning 5 points for its fallout, 2 for destruction, and 8 for debris. The little parts of the reactor scattered everywhere and its flaming runes in the middle of the fallout zone really make up for how little blocks were damaged. After adding a bonus of 3 dope points, this reactor gets 18 points. The Watts reactor does not leak any corium. Instead, it leaks a bunch of toxic metal sludge that looks disturbingly similar to sewage all over the map. I mean, this stuff has spread everywhere. Between the sludge and the way it melts the ground beneath it, the Watts reactor gets 4 points for destruction and 5 points for debris. In terms of radiation, this meltdown gets the typical 5 points for fallout and a bonus 5 dope points for the custom explosion animation, totaling 19 points. The dark fusion core is eerily similar to the draconic reactor in its structure, although I will give it credit and say that its general operation is quite different, needing fuel insertion and power input-output cooling. While this meltdown gets a 0 in both fallout and debris, it gets 9 points in destruction for this massive crater, and of course the light show it created earns it 10 dope points. That's 19 points for the DFC. The RBMK reactor has my favorite meltdown by far. While it isn't nearly as destructive as the DFC or the Draconic reactor, its corium melt does damage the ground beneath the reactor, netting at 3 points. The main appeal of the RBMK's meltdown for me, though, is the debris itself. From the scattered parts around the reactor to the molten sludge and solidified corium in the reactor itself, it gets a full 10 points in the debris category. With an additional 5 points for fallout and 7 points for its custom explosion animation, the RBMK gets a total of 25 points. Technically, this next meltdown is still an RBMK's, but I think you'll understand why I included it as a separate entry. Yeah, so what the hell? That's 15 dope points right there. I don't even really know why this meltdown is a thing, but it's certainly not one I'd want to take place in my base, even though it only gets 2 points for destruction. That's namely because of the debris, which includes reducing the entire surrounding area to an ash-covered wasteland peppered with crimson fire. Yeah, that's a 10 out of 10. Additionally, I believe this meltdown produces digamma radiation, so that'll be 7 points in fallout for a total of 34 points. Honestly, I just wanted to use this video as an excuse to show off some cool nuclear meltdowns that can take place if reactors are mishandled. The rankings were probably a bit out of whack because of the strange tallying system I used where maybe I counted like the exact same thing differently in different circumstances, but it was all just in good fun. Hopefully the Meatball Craft video will be coming out somewhat soon, but I kind of forgot when making this video that I can really only do one video at a time because of how much effort it takes to make these. So this video's existence is actually delaying Meatball Craft, and I am sorry for that, but Meatball Craft, I'm making very good progress, and I really do hope to get the video out by the end of February. I don't know if that's a realistic expectation, but I will try. So thank you so much for watching.